Yeah. So the ApeCoin airdrop, and then they dropped the commercial for the other side, which included Cryptodes, WoW, Punks, Meebits, Nouns, Apes, and Mutants, all in a ship flying to the other side. It was such a high quality, well made commercial. It got I even get goosebumps thinking about when it came out and how excited everybody was because they're like, not only are we getting a metaverse, but we're tying all these projects together in some way. We didn't know what that meant yet, like that they were in the ship, but that meant something that they were in the ship, and people were buying every project that was in there because they're like, I don't know what this means, but it's big and I want to be involved in it.
Hello, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to 2023 and to a special 3-part episode of From the Blockchain, where the ladies behind the podcast take a look back and review some of the highlights of Web3 in 2022. This is Ashley, also known as Board Becky, and over the next 40 minutes or so, you'll hear myself chatting with NFT Ignition and Kara about some of the past year's biggest stories and our personal takes. It was a busy and crazy year with a lot of ups and downs, and it's possible we missed a few things. Make sure to find us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok at @fame_ladies. Tag us in your stories or posts about the episode and let us know your thoughts or any big stories or major innovations you think we should have mentioned. I also want to tell you that it's been such a pleasure running this podcast for over a year now, and the From the Blockchain and Fame Lady Squad team want to thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe to the show and leave a review. We would absolutely love to hear from you. Now, let's get to part 1 of our 2022 year in review. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of From the Blockchain. This is a very special episode. Super excited to say that I'm here. I'm Board Becky, also known as Ashley IRL, with both of my co-hosts, Danielle, NFT Ignition, and Kara, Lady C. This is like our end of year recap episode. We're so excited as we lean into 2023. This is likely the last episode you're going to hear for the year. Ladies, welcome. Welcome. So nice to be with both of you.
Yeah, this is our first episode that we've all three been on here together.
It's taken a while.
Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Let's see if we can manage. No, it's all good. So this should be a fun one. Like, there's so much has happened in the NFT and Web3 space, like over the last 2 years, for as long as I've been around. And it's so hard to keep up. And 2022 as year was no different. Like, there's been so much. We've spent some time having a look of like January to December, and it's hard to narrow down all of the things that have, transpired, whether predicted or not predicted, and have certainly helped shape the emotional ride that can sometimes be Web3, as well as, of course, the marketplace, and some of the innovation as well. So we're going to recap 2022. We're going to start thinking about what's 2023. How about let's start before we dive in, like general sentiments. Danielle, like what was your general sentiments about 2022?
Well, it started off basically, we were all just in the hype, just stuck in the middle of all the hype, and everything was so exciting. We saw some outside factors kind of change that, and we went into what we call bear. And I think I've seen us go into bear a couple times before, and really what was interesting is a lot of times people stop building, they stop doing anything. They're like, well, what's the point? Everything dropped by 30%, we're out. But this time, around later in this 2022, I'm seeing people aren't giving up now. They're not setting their projects aside because of where the market is. They're ready to build, they're ready to grow their project regardless of what the price of everything is, which to me, I just love seeing.
Yeah, that's really true. And it's nice. I think it's so helpful to hear that context, like folks who've been around for maybe a little longer, what the differences are and how you're seeing things evolve differently now. How about you, Kara?
I feel the same way. I've never clocked a bear market in this way. I have clocked recessions before, and it's been interesting seeing that the advancements of the tech and the integration of the tech only seems to be, as Danielle was saying, only seems to be happening more. And so that's really exciting. Like we've seen Instagram, for instance, having NFT drops, even though they're not calling them NFT drops. We've seen Reddit adapt some of that stuff. So I think it's, and that's the stuff that we've seen within our circle. There's tons of other greater stuff happening behind the scenes. And it makes me really bullish for the long term, even though this year has been a roller coaster that has been a very hard one to ride, but a good time all the same.
I think that's the funny thing. Like, I one of my predictions of next year is probably going to be this move away from talking about this space in terms of like just the market, right? Like, there's other things happening outside of whether or not the economics are bullish or bearish. I sort of alluded to that, I think, in one of our most recent episodes, but I love that. To me, I think that my observation, and maybe I'm just too much of a half glass full person, so I'm just going to say that up front. Like, that's just my way. But it just feels like it's maturing. Like, despite all the craziness, there's a lot of the problems are starting to be hopefully rinsed out. We'll see, which was bound to happen. And some of the silliness that was fun and awesome and like crazy, like these all-time high NFT values, which were wonderful for many. They were also really difficult to talk about in the public sphere because it was tough to justify like why things were selling and trading at such incredible values. So I think there's a maturity happening. I think there's some really cool people getting involved. We're going to jump into this. So we're, first, full disclosure, we're probably going to miss things. Like, if you're listening to this episode and you're like, these are my top 3 most important things that happened in 2022, and if we missed it, like, sorry. This is too much that has happened this year. So why don't we have a look back? So 2021 was crazy. Things were selling like for incredible values. There were still ups and downs in that market, but it was a lot of optimism, a lot of fun, a lot of firsts, and a lot of brand new people to the space. Then comes January. And I don't know, you guys, like, for me, it felt like a very much continuation of that wave from the year before.
It
Yeah.
was kind of the same, but a little crazier. Like I found that there was, we saw a little bit of TikTok action and people who were like, I've never heard of blockchain before. Let's find out about it by releasing this 10K collection of this art that I drew in the 5th grade. Like there was a lot of, there was a lot of market seekers, I would say, than like people who were fully invested in the tech. And it added to the same madness of last year, but it was a little different. It was now people who were interested but felt that the only way to learn was complete trial by fire, which just
I
made the
would
space
say
more
it,
fun, to be honest.
I would say January's always kind of have this like pump to them. Well, tax purposes, right? Like people are holding off on doing things at the end of the year that they can wait to do until January for to save themselves some money. So you'll see a lot of big sales in January that people might have been waiting to do just for that reason.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like December, we certainly of 2021, we certainly saw some sales where people were taking some big losses. So
Yes.
December is usually a time where you might see people selling things for below the value that they might be worth, and that like the tax harvesting or whatever. So people have their strategies, and they're also willing to like lose out because it will help them in the long run. Maybe something they don't care as much about anymore, et cetera. And that can impact the market probably in December. And then come January, for those not paying attention, suddenly it's like it could come back. So I'm curious. I don't think that's necessarily where we are today, but if you're listening in real time, it might be interesting to watch to see if you see any of that type of activity for sure.
Yeah.
January was like, I meant to double check our stats, but January was a big month for a lot of NFT projects, especially the women-led, women-focused NFT projects. So we saw and felt at Fame Lady Squad even like the benefit of this, and it was fun to be kind of entering the new year with some excitement, feeling that like people were really into everything that was going on. A lot of our peers were experiencing some good times and feeling the optimism. And I think, Cara, you had mentioned like this was also because of this, you were seeing a lot of new entrants coming into this space and being excited. And it was like a fun point still.
Yeah, and they also blew up the TikTok platform, which is interesting to me. We started to see a lot more NFT people interested on TikTok that were interested in NFTs. They weren't necessarily the same players on Twitter, and so that was fascinating.
Hmm.
I'm just double checking because Danielle so
You know,
kindly created a doc for us. And did LooksRare
mhm.
drop in January too? The LooksRare token? Did we get that token in
Um,
January?
maybe.
Was that the
We're
announcement?
doing research in real time, everybody. There was, but that, I mean, Looks Rare is an NFT marketplace platform. I don't know,
Yes.
like, are people still regularly using it? I remember at the time, an exciting thing to see an alternative to OpenSea.
It was amazing.
And we did see that as a trend, right? That was a trend in 2022 for sure.
Yeah. Well, and there was a lot
Obviously,
of
like a lot of
sorry. There was a lot of drama around the looks token, if you remember, because there was airdropped to people based on listing and then later based on trading volume. And so people were able to do something we call wash trading, which is basically sell to themselves from another account large token amounts, like apes. If you're selling an ape for 100 ETH back and forth to yourself, you're giving yourself a larger airdrop of this looks token.
that to me that's I wonder if Looks Rare, like the folks, and then I would not to pick on them, but like as an example, I wonder if they're thinking ahead about some of these things and planning for it, just expecting, okay, well, this is going to happen to some extent, and
Yeah.
that's we're just willing to accept it. Or are these things that are just being learned along the way? Because that's been my experience, like just to kind of really zoom out generally over the last year, is there's a lot of things where people are like, we're just going to try this and see what happens and then deal with any sort of like, not, I
Well,
don't even want to say repercussions, consequences, but just like figuring out how to like plug the holes as we go along.
well, even if the trading volume is artificial, it benefits them in both. It makes it look like the platform is super busy and it draws people away from OpenSea just for that reason. And also, they're making money on all those trades. And they're giving you back a token. You're paying them ETH and they're giving you looks basically when you're wash trading.
It's one of my favorite ways of creating marketing that doesn't look like marketing. So you think that you're getting tokens and you're making like free money, but they're actually paying you for marketing because everybody will then get on Twitter and be like, I got this many looks rare. How many did you get? And it's a really
Mhm.
smart way of using social media and tokenomics to promote your business.
Might be a fun reminder, like even to myself, like I did not do any wash trading, but I did list a few things to get my looks tokens, and then converted to ETH, I guess. And then I was able to stake that ETH. I still have that ETH staked. It's not a lot, but I have 3 different profiles and all 3 have staked ETH. But I'm pretty sure it was worth more back in January than it's worth today. So
It's on
we'll
an
just wait until next January or next year. See
if
where
it's
it's at.
at this rate, if it's on an exchange, you better just hope that it's still there and that you have access to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that speaks to, there's so many different moves and most of us could have made, but it's like a lot of this value was created out of thin air, out of these types of opportunities, right? Where you like participated in something and you were given something and yeah, could you have sold it, made money? Yeah, but it's not like you were putting more skin in the game. And that's kind of been part of this whole thing. So I think it's important to remember sometimes when you're feeling really sad and want extra eggnog, thinking about all the things you could have done. Um, what else I want, we should move through this. But I think that Danielle, you might be able to speak to some of these other things that happened early in the year, um,
There's
that you
one
had
other
listed that you
one.
thought were,
Yeah,
I don't want to cut off. Yeah, but I did want to pop
go
up
for it.
that because you also wrote that GameStop came out in January, and it's one of my favorite thing that's happening in the space. Like we've had a meeting recently, Ashley and I, with an old platform that we used to play on. Some people used to play on that's now taking on the idea of metaverse, but it was an old game. It was a chat game that we all know very well. And GameStop is another really great example. Mozilla Hubs is also back. Like there's been these older Web2 companies that have made a comeback via either straight up selling NFTs or as some form of metaverse. And so I thought it'd be cool to
Radio
touch on
Shack.
that. Yes, the Radio Shack intern.
Radio Shack just hopped on, like Radio Shack hopped on Twitter Spaces, right? That was what you're talking about, you
It was
guys. Like they
our
just,
Twitter
They have
Spaces.
also
Radio Shack intern hopped.
yeah.
they also have some very hilarious tweets that we should not appropriately read on this podcast, but I'm sure you can find screenshots of all the ones that have been deleted. Yes, I will never forget some of the things
So-
that account tweeted ever.
Oh my gosh. This is again, just for our audience, like these are the random things that are happening in this space and the random people who are playing around. I like don't know much about GameStop. I don't really even know like what GameStop is, if I'm being totally honest with you.
GameStop is in the same kind of place. Nickelodeon also had an NFT drop. It's these kind of companies that are speaking to the people who are now investors in the marketplace. Like, I'm surprised Chuck E. Cheese didn't do something. They might have, but it was just like, you know, when they'd be perfect. Have a Chuck E. Cheese token, come on. But like, they were around when we were kids, and so GameStop's whole thing was they sold video games, and then you could trade in your video games. You could start to like, instead of just owning the game and hanging on to it, GameStop allowed for you to learn about more games, change out your systems, and kind of create like an ecosystem of gaming. And then GameStop is more notoriously known thanks to Wall Street Bets because the big hedge funds, I guess, or I don't know I don't know too much about that stuff, so pardon my speaking, but they tried to short the stock. So they were slowly hoping for GameStop to die. And then Wall Street Bets came in. And it was kind of the first time that we've seen, like, I can't even call it protest, but it was kind of protest by investing. And so we had seen, thanks to like all of these other, I guess, social media kind of investing, like I think of Robinhood, for instance, it allowed people to invest without necessarily needing a broker. It made it super accessible. And so that's why when Elon would say something, it would pump or dump because you finally had people who had quick, immediate access to making a choice in terms of investments. GameStop was one of those iconically saved projects because of those investments. It was pretty much GameStop and AMC. So they just utilized their gaming platform to then start. I believe they're going to sell video games on the platform, or I think so. I think that's the plan, but I don't know what they're selling at the moment. Yeah.
All right. So January turns to February. And you know, there's momentum, obviously, a lot going on. I mean, in January, by the way, everyone, I found out I was pregnant and thinking, holy crap, like this is going to be a big year because I was just feeling the momentum of the Web3 space, was fully expecting to be like all in, a lot of events, like snowball of this emerging industry, right? And we see some big things. Danielle highlighted there was a CryptoPunk number 5822 sold for 8,000 ETH when ETH was like pretty high at the time. That's what, $23 million US. You've noted.
Mm-hmm.
So don't fact check us, but you know, it was big, right? Like big deal. And X2, Y2 launched with an airdrop to OpenSea holders. So direct competition. So you're seeing like these marketplaces coming in, really pushing. So just like a lot of, you know, incentivizing and thinking like this year's going hot, right? That was a unique time. And then things shifted pretty quickly. So I don't know if we want to talk a little bit more about these two things, but maybe the flip side is suddenly Russia invades Ukraine and everything changes. Like I think it was felt immediately. I don't know, at least anecdotally, as a human consumer, like observer, it felt super sudden. And obviously the war in and of itself is way more important than a lot of these other things. So I don't want to make light of the fact that this is like a serious human issue and there's things that need to still be addressed. But just from a like macroeconomics standpoint, like things halted and people were scared, people were selling stuff, people were taking out their reserves, like taking out money, probably putting it under their mattress. I don't know. Like, what were you guys seeing in February?
Yeah, I mean, it was just panic. People aren't sure how it's going to affect us. They're not sure how long it's going to go on. And anytime people panic, that's what they do. They pull out money out of wherever it is, if it's in the stock market, if it's invested in a business, if it's invested in crypto, you want to have access to those funds if something happens. So it's just a natural reaction. We saw the same thing when COVID news hit in March of 2020. People did the same thing. The stock market went down, crypto went down, everything went down.
I saw something that I really liked actually, which was also a further belief in crypto making a change, knowing that there was war about to happen. People were then using that crypto to fund their escape. There's been people in the Ukraine who were able
Mm-hmm.
to leave the Ukraine with the money, but also NFTs were being sold with Ukraine donation in mind. And it was the first time that I had
Mm-hmm.
seen a full social cause, possibly like it felt like there was a potential to change the outcome using this digital method, and that really
Mm-hmm.
excited me. And
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's been really interesting. And it hasn't made front page news, but I saw it via like people telling their story or what we saw on Twitter. And I'd be really interested to see how much was capable from people who either owned crypto in the Ukraine or people who received those donations.
Yeah.
Well, some people weren't able to access their funds at a certain point. They couldn't get to an ATM. They couldn't, or, in a very extreme war situation, your money might not have any value anymore. So it is in those instances, crypto was some people's only option to pay for anything.
Yeah, I wish we had some numbers, but I remember the big support Ukraine push and the fundraising that was being done. That's such an important point, Cara. Um, and I also remember, just like full transparency, the feeling of like, how do we know if this is going to the right place? And I guess obviously
Mm-hmm.
there are mechanisms with it being on a public ledger of like, this is all traced, but it's still like, if for the lay person who doesn't know, like, how do you know that that end wallet is going somewhere where you want it to go? But the flip side is, if something legitimate is happening for good, the neat thing about it, at least the way it played out in this case, is that there's like no bureaucracy. When you think about like not for profits, who many do so much good work, there's very often times like so many decision makers, a lot of things have to be thought through. You're not able to like act as quickly as maybe you would like. There's probably a lot of red tape and like different like administrative things that need to be put in place. In this case, there was basically, just to simplify from my perspective, a wallet was set up that was intended for funds to go to, and people were just able to send their crypto to it. How that was distributed, you guys, maybe you know more, but what we do know is they raised a lot of money for the effort to support people in Ukraine. So I guess this is kind of like the good and the bad with February, is we saw, obviously the market took a big hit, and a lot of bad things happening in the world, but we also saw innovation being used in a way that could help people and could help us start thinking about how to be more proactive, perhaps even in the future with these sorts of things. So that's one of my takeaways. I mean, I hate to wonder what that person who bought, or company, I have no idea who bought that $23 million CryptoPunk, but I'm wondering how they felt in March. Like, as that, and whether or not it's been traded. Maybe someone knows. But if you have conviction about your NFTs, it might not matter.
Well, I
Yeah, I don't
mean,
think
we
somebody
did see
makes a
that
$23 million purchase lightly.
yeah.
No, I don't think so.
And we did see that conviction again later on in March, like noting back to Danielle's document, like Pixelmon came out of nowhere and people had money to pay for it. Like I would love to know who the marketing team was, but everybody's like, Pixelmon. It seemed so
Can you
random.
tell us tell us about Pixelmon? So we're moved into March now. Tell us about Pixelmon.
I don't know nearly enough. I know about Kevin and I don't want to talk
Okay.
about that. I'd much rather have you guys discuss
So
that more completely.
Yeah.
So it was a project that was minted for 3 ETH. It was a very hard whitelist to get onto. And basically, you were supposed to get 3D metaverse assets of your character, and it was going to be a game. And basically, people paid all this money for it. And when they revealed, the art was nowhere near the quality of what the preview art had been. And they claimed it was due to like a layering issue, like they flattened the wrong way, or that they'd be able to fix it. And they had just raised millions and millions and millions of dollars. So that's, they're like, no problem, we'll put that money into it. But out of that came this meme, Kevin, which was like this green frog guy. I don't know if he's a frog, but he looks kind of like a frog. And he's got like his tongue sticking out and his eyes are all it was just he became such a, you know, high quality meme and involved in so many different things because it was just it was hilarious how much money people spent on what ended up looking like all wonky and never got fixed. They never
It
got
does,
fixed, by
yeah.
the
It
way.
speaks to the sort of degen side of all of this, doesn't it? Like, and I to me feel like the meme of Kevin feels very like almost old school meme, crypto meme or whatever, kind of really throwing it back, and this it kind of goes back to like, are we all being fools, like just participating in this crazy world? So, Danielle, they never ended up fixing it. I actually didn't follow this really important story. No.
No, I haven't seen anything in terms of any announcements for them even working on it. I
Okay.
did see a vote at one point that everyone wanted to keep the Kevins looking like Kevins, but to change everything else back to what they're supposed to look like. So if that ever happens, the Kevins will still be that way.
I will
Oh
say
my goodness. These are going to be
I'm on the Pixelmon site and it looks way better than what first came out. I gotta say, it does actually look pretty good.
That's it. Always did. That was the problem.
Okay. If anybody knows what's going on with Kevin and Pixelmon, like this is something where you can share with us. Maybe we'll do a special episode, even updating on Kevin. Like, where is Kevin now? Where is Kevin in 2023?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry, we're having too much fun over here. That yeah, that was a big deal. And this was kind of one of those funny moments too, where it's like, to Danielle's point, so many people wanted to get on that allow list. They were, you know, probably really upset that they weren't able to get on it. And then they saw this reveal and all of this stuff going down. And probably it was a blessing, obviously, in disguise, not being able to get in on it. So this is kind of some of the roller coaster stuff. And I think about our audience listening, for anyone who's like never bought an NFT and has kind of been watching from the sidelines, thinking about the tech and like the opportunities in this space, and just thinking about all this silliness that's happened. But I think it's important to understand kind of where this is all spawned out of, like where it's grown out of, and what people don't want to see anymore. It's like we're going to look back in nostalgia, I think, with some of this stuff, but we don't want to duplicate these experiences, I don't think. Oh, this is something that, again, I feel like sometimes I'm really behind the news and I hear about it like the next day and don't really fully understand because they're, you know, related to things that I wasn't following directly, like Axie Infinity. The Axie Infinity bridge hacked for 600 million. I barely knew what that meant at the time, but I knew it was a big deal. Because first, who is Axie Infinity? Who wants to talk about that?
Yeah. So Axie Infinity is a game. Sorry.
No, you go for it.
It was basically like a play to earn game where you can breed your Axies. They're like these little blobs. They're really cute little blobs, and they usually have like a little ears or a little hair or something to distinguish different color blobs. They have different skills, different qualities, and you can breed them. And then people play a game with them that at one point was making people a ton of money. It was in the whole play to earn ecosystem. It was the top game for people to play. Now bridges are where you take crypto from one blockchain to another. And it is usually where that crypto is the most susceptible is at the bridge itself, because there needs to be custody of the tokens on both sides, like the token you put in and the token you put out. Wrapped Bitcoin would be a good example of this. There isn't actually Bitcoin on Ethereum. What it is they put it in like a safe, and then they'll take some out of the safe on the other side, and it just has the same value. They have the Bitcoin, it's on Bitcoin chain. Mm-hmm. You're getting Ethereum worth what Bitcoin is worth on the other side. So this is where these safes, basically on both sides, they just hold massive amounts of crypto. So if they can be hacked in any way, not only can they be taken, but they can be taken off the chain at the same time. And this is $100 million hack for Axie Infinity.
This impacted, I feel like this was kind of like following all this other bad news. And, you know, I do feel like it impacted people's sense of security and just where the crypto, by the way, the crypto market at that time, while it was challenged by the war and all that stuff and we saw values come down, it was still holding out like pretty good, right? But it just felt through the air like one more thing, which I think we're going to get into a little bit today. But this was one of those things, I think, that,
I was just checking online, and the Solana bridge hack would have happened in February. So this would have been another one that, like, it would have been another. Apparently, as I've learned, bridges are not great to use at all. Like, if you do use them, revoke right afterwards, all of that stuff. But it started to like shake up our security, whatever security we had felt in the space. Just it started to be like, how secure are we? You know, because people tend to look at that as a whole. They don't look at the bridge separately. They just think of it as the entire thing. So yeah, that definitely contributed to the feeling of the shakiness of it all.
We should shout out Axie Infinity a little bit. Like, I don't like not financial advice. Like, I don't really know much about it. All I know is they are like still like super active. I think they've found their way through all of this stuff. They have almost 1 million followers on Twitter. So like I think the other point, the takeaway from that is like a lot of these bad things can happen, but if the companies behind them are legitimate and like maybe they've made some mistakes, maybe didn't, again, figuring their way through some of these things, there's still possibly a way forward. So I think that's an important thing for people to realize as we're having these conversations is like bad things are going to happen. Bad things have happened, as with, any new emerging tech and business. But the players who are equipped and not just mean well, there's lots of people who mean well who will fail. But I think there's still a way forward for a lot of these folks if they have the right infrastructure in place. Another big thing, and I remember this happening while I was driving, and I apologize, you guys, everyone's going to hear my baby a little bit in the background right now, but I was driving in the worst traffic in Vancouver that like is very not typical, and find out Yuga acquires CryptoPunks. And I was choked because I had just been looking at buying some Meebits, probably like the day before, because there had been a dip in the value, and Meebits are sort of the I don't know, the companion, for lack of a better word, companion NFT collection that goes with CryptoPunks, which was like the first and most important kind of most infamous collection of Ethereum-based NFTs. And Meebits were at way back when kind of seen as like in competition with the Bored Apes, like which project is going to do better. But anyways, I have one Meebit. I still have it. But I was looking at buying some more, and then Yuga acquires CryptoPunks, which includes the Meebits. Yuga Labs are the folks behind Bored Ape Yacht Club, for those who don't know. And this was like a huge deal. This was like, we didn't know these types of things could happen, or that this type of money was going to be involved, that there was enough incentive and forward thinking for this type of thing to happen. What was going on when you guys heard about Yuga acquiring CryptoPunks?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was pretty clear the reason that they did that was because of what they announced later with the commercial for the other side. And they wanted to, part of that is that, this whole metaverse that they're building, they're going to have 3D assets inside of there, of your apes, of your mutants, of these other projects that allow you to have your own IP. And now punks, you didn't have your own IP by owning a punk up until this point when Yuga bought them. And that's the whole reason they bought them, was to give the holders their own IP so they could then build punk bodies in this metaverse. A smart move, because people are going to want to walk around with their punks, but it was also good for punk holders, especially people like Spotty, who had been building massive brands using their punk and maybe without permission in some way.
My thing that I loved the most about it was it kind of cracked open the space in a way that competition wasn't so hot anymore. Now it was like collaboration, and I still think about it. There's only about 4.5% of the population in this space. And it felt like there was a lot of time kind of wasted and yet not wasted. Like the best thing about being in competition with other projects is that it forces you to define what your brand is, because you can't serve everyone. And if you're competing with somebody else, you have to start clocking like what makes me different than the other companies, which is a good thing. But what I really loved about Yuga acquiring CryptoPunks was that this kind of like accepted disagreement between two squads, like you're either a CryptoPunk fan or a Bored Ape Yacht Club fan, was now destroyed. And now it was this kind of idea of what happens when the big projects get together and what does that mean for the space. And so I think it definitely made me start to consider like what like us being acquired by Daz, what that actually looked like, and what happened, as you said, later on, when we found out that was just the beginning move for a huge move that takes place in the same month, right? Like that also took place in, what are we in, March?
Mm-hmm.
And those are like, to me,
Yep. They did the ape coin airdrop.
yeah, that's like, those are systemic shifts. Like when you decide, because it's under that, because then they had that commercial. Yes. Go ahead. You were saying with the ape coin drop.
Yeah. So the ApeCoin airdrop, and then they dropped the commercial for the other side, which included Cryptodes, WoW, Punks, Meebits, Nouns, Apes, and Mutants, all in a ship flying to the other side. It was such a high quality, well-made commercial. It got I even get goosebumps thinking about when it came out and how excited everybody was, because they're like, not only are we getting a metaverse, but we're tying all these projects together in some way. We didn't know what that meant yet, like that they were in the ship, but that meant something, that they were in the ship, and people were buying every project that was in there because they're like, I don't know what this means, but it's big and I want to be involved in it.
I did the same thing. I looked at the ship and I'm like, is that the one with the lowest floor? Which one can I get that has the lowest floor? Because I want in. I also loved seeing a World of Woman in the back. Like I knew she was going to be there, but it was just so nice to see the aesthetic of that project is so different than the rest. So it's just nice to see her hanging out in the back with everybody else. And I still love it. I think it was a major moment in the space. And I think, like, not to say that other projects weren't doing this, but I think collaborations also started to change after that. And I hope that they change even more, so that people start to realize that, like, we're a small group of people. And if we do come together, we can easily build something bigger, because you've got double the amount of brains, triple the amount of brains to do the same thing that you were trying to do on your own. So I loved that moment. I really loved it. It felt major.
And it'll feel even more major when all of those projects in the metaverse together, walking around, doing their thing. I don't even know what that means yet. It'll be gamified. There'll be auction houses, I know, all sorts of stuff. So yeah, that'll be cool.
When did we see, do you remember when we started to see other side test runs? I think it was a little bit later on, but we got to see that this year.
Yeah, that was definitely this. I want to say October.
It's wild to think that we saw that, and like the quality.
July. It was July.
That's wild. Like we always think that everything should come out by tomorrow, but that came out really quickly, and it was just test runs. We don't have the full thing yet, but it came out pretty quick.
It was amazing the how many people was able to like be in the game playing and it not be laggy on just a regular non-gaming computer. I saw people on, old laptops running around on their phones even, like, and there was just so many players. Like I know in my experience, when you play a game where there's 10,000 people in one place all jumping on top of each other, you have latency issues. You can barely see what's going on, and the game starts to have glitchy errors and stuff. We saw like so many people in this one little space jumping all over each other, and it was so smooth.
That's major, because there's still metaverses that they'll have several servers because they can't handle like 500 people, And so for that do that,
Yeah.
it bodes really well. It made me think of, I don't even want to say it because it's
Yeah.
not there yet, but it did make me think kind of like a Fortnite, like the quality, the image quality and the movement gave a little bit of a Fortnite feel, which was really cool.
hmm Well, should we move into April?
Yes. That I was hoping
All right. We got a lot of stuff here in April.
I was hoping to make it a little smoother, but April was its own thing as well.
Well, let's start with Pudgy Penguins project was sold for 750
Wild.
ETH. The entire project, the
That's
whole
wild.
IP.
I forget that that happened. And then I'll hear people like shout out the person who had bought it. And I'm like, right. Like somebody bought Pudgy Penguins and revived it again. Right?
Yeah. And it survived that, which most projects that have undergone that sort of a thing, Untamed Elephants as an example, they just don't do so well once the original team is gone. I would say we're another example of a project that did well after being handed over.
Pudgy Penguins was around like early days too. Like I remember them being around when I had bought my Fame Lady, and then Cole was like iconically tied to our story. So it's kind of cool. Kind of cool to see them still going strong, and people are still rocking their penguin PFP.
Do you remember when they dropped their companion, the baby penguins?
I didn't know.
They stopped the mint, I think, because they literally were just the same penguins but smaller.
Thanks, guys.
We just shrunk them down and put more background space behind them.
Scale it lower. Their floor price.
Here's your babies.
Their floor price is 4.52 ETH. So not bad at all. Decent volume. That's awesome. Oh, and then Drifter. Drifter did his open edition.
Yep.
That's
Drifter
awesome.
Shoots. Yeah, if anybody's not familiar with Drifter Shoots, he has an incredible story. I would definitely look into it. We should actually have him on the show if we can manage to pull that. But he has an amazing story of he's a vet, and he was had some PTSD, and how he dealt with that was climbing to the top of buildings, climbing to the top of bridges, climbing on a crane and going to the top of it, and taking these amazing pictures with his Vans in them. He always has his shoes showing in his pictures. And he had actually gone to jail at one point because of trespassing and taking his pictures on places that were unsafe, that the police didn't want him to be. And they took not only him and put him in jail, but they also took all of his pictures away. So he worked with a lawyer for a long time, and in the end, he finally was able to get out and get his pictures back too, which was a huge deal. And so he made this NFT called First Day Out, and that's a video of him. I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it. It's just a video of him when he got out of jail, spinning and just like appreciating his freedom and like kissing the ground, and all the things that you would do getting out of jail. And he minted that. And there's two pictures in the NFT. You get that, and then you get a picture of him on a bridge with like the moonlight behind him. It was just a really beautiful shot. And he did an open edition, which means that you could buy as many copies of that picture as you want, and it sold over 10,000 copies. And there was a portion of it that did go to helping people get out of jail.
Drifter has become like a major NFT artist. He's also one of the first artists that Instagram has offered his work on their platform, and that sold out in a matter of seconds. And he also, what I do like about him is that he has different access or different ways of accessing his work. It's not only on major platforms. Like the fact that you can get First Day Out on OpenSea and stuff like that, I think is really great. He used to do so. He still does it, but on Twitter he would do those good morning posts that were video posts of him at the top, like at the top of these high buildings.
Vibe check.
Oh,
the vibe checks.
It would drive me crazy.
They always make me sick.
Yeah.
They make me sick every time.
Yeah.
I have to stop looking at them because I feel fear for his safety.
Exactly. But it's great to see him just be a really successful artist, particularly a successful NFT artist.
Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of our special 3-part episode, 2022, A Year in Review. Don't forget to subscribe. Happy New Year and stay tuned for part 2.